Hello again.
Hi, how are you?
Good. For whatever reason, the last debate, you were almost inaudible at the beginning, and that is true again. I'm not sure why. Remember, it picked up after about a minute.
Yeah.
I don't really know what that is. I can hear you. You're just very faint. Um, Before we begin, I want to explain for your benefit and presumably the benefit of anyone listening to this, uh, what exactly my topic is. Um, Not all expert opinions are created equal. The expert opinion of and I can't say that word, okay? But that's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. I just thought that looked more cool. I have a friend who's an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and he has pronounced this word for me multiple times, and I still can't manage it. So the expert opinion of an ear, nose, and throat doctor should be respected more than the expert opinion of a cosmologist. Um, that's what I'm asserting, and I have my reasons for making that assertion, obviously, that you may or may not ultimately agree with. Um, so before I say anything else, do you have any questions?
Can you hear me a little bit better now? Or is it
No,
still
it's the same. The last time your volume increased, you leaned forward and
I
and
don't know.
it was like something that was maybe only partially plugged in. That doesn't make any sense. That electronics don't work that way, I know, but suddenly you were audible.
I don't know. Am I a little bit better now?
Maybe marginally.
Okay. Well, I just want to ask, so it's expert opinion,
Now I can hear
but
you again. Now you're audible.
okay,
100%.
cool, awesome, awesome. So it's expert opinion. Is it about their field or in general?
No, it's not that expert opinions shouldn't be respected. It's that some expert opinion uh, is more worthy than other expert opinion. Not all expert opinion.
No, I get that. What I'm saying is like the expert opinion within the field that that person is the expert of, or like as a general rule,
Oh,
like
oh. Well, I mean, probably both. Um, Not only as a general rule, but primarily, and my argument here would be yes, the field. And I can narrow the fields down a bit if you want.
I would prefer that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, when I go to an ENT, when I call a plumber, uh, when I go to a dentist, those are all pretty practical, hands-on uh, professions, occupations, what have you. Um, and pretty immediately, it's obvious that you would rather have your tonsils removed by an ENT than by me, right? For pragmatic reasons. I might know how to take your tonsils out. I don't, by the way. But an ENT's training and experience gives him very practical, literal hands-on experience. So, you know, uh, the man who delivered my first baby, my first daughter, had delivered 3,500 babies in his career prior to delivering mine. Uh, that made me trust him. Um, Not that there aren't doctors who were, incompetent. There are. But what I'm saying is that a doctor who can demonstrate evidence-based, tangible effect, I'm going to trust for good reason, versus a cosmologist who is backward projecting. The scientific method, and I'm going to apply it here, maybe across disciplines for which it wasn't really intended, but the scientific method, normally you look at X and project Y, you extrapolate Y. A cosmologist does it in reverse. You're trying to guess what happened, 13 billion years ago based on evidence that you see today. And I'm maintaining that we have no fucking idea, that you might as well stuck your finger up your ass and pulled out a grapefruit, that it's about as valid. Anyway, that's where I'm going with that. People talk about the Big Bang as if it's something that's been decided. No, it fucking hasn't been decided. It's an idea that replaced a previous idea, and in another 50 years, we might have another idea. That's what's great about science, in my opinion, is that it is constantly subject to revision. If somebody comes up with a better idea, then it is true or correct until somebody has a better idea that supplants it. I don't like the hubris and the, in my opinion, am I gonna pronounce this right? The naivety, whatever, of people who will state categorically the universe is 13.5 billion years old. It exists as a result of the Big Bang. Maybe, maybe not. Try to prove that, and you can't unless your name is Doctor Who. Anyway, that's where I'm at.
Okay. Now, I want to start off and talk about some of your statements that you made about dentistry. First and foremost, right? Dentistry, for the longest time, has stated that you should floss your teeth. Recent papers have come out stating that flossing your teeth has absolutely no effect on your gum health or your teeth in general, right? So here's the thing, though. You're applying very practical scientific measurements to very abstract scientific efforts, right? So if you ask a physicist, instead of, we'll say a cosmologist, but really they're physicists with a bit extra leaning,
right?
And you go to them and you say, this practical education here that this person has is better than this here, and he'll say, well, let's compare apples to apples. Let's talk about the theory of gravity. It is provable on every single level that we are subject to gravity right now. I can drop this pen, gravity, right? And he can demonstrate that. And he can give you practical exercises. He can give you practical applicabilities for it. And he can derive the mathematics that are involved in showing that. He can go so far as to say what the sun's gravity does towards our gravity, which affects our gravitational pull to our center land. And they can mathematically derive all of that. Sure. And they can model that 3-dimensionally, 4-dimensionally, 5-dimensionally. Which anything past 3-dimensional gets really abstract, because then you've got a fourth variable, sometimes time or something like that. But what I'm saying is if you look at high-level dentistry science and research and development it's just as wishy-washy as high-level physics. So there is no difference between the two when it comes at the highest level of abstraction between the two. Secondly, one is a much, much older science, I guess you could say, and one's a much newer science, right? So we would have to say like dentistry and things of this nature are a much older, scientifically tested point, right? Cosmology in the modern sense is still rather young, though there are sciences that are even younger than it now. So I'd have to say when it comes to the baseline, I don't think there's any true disagreement between physicists, what all physicists believe. And I would say the same with dentistry, that they all believe this. But at the highest levels of abstraction, there's going to be huge disputes. Now, secondly, to your claim on cosmology, look, I get it that the Big Bang is not absolutely provable, but there is a lot of evidence. It's not like conjectured evidence either. There's a lot of objective evidence that leads us to believe that there is the Big Bang. Now, the formulas that they use to derive this, that may be under scrutiny, which I disagree with. I think math has so far done very well as explaining the universe thus far. I mean, people who don't believe in quantum mechanics can also not also believe in a computer, but you can't have one without the other, right? So computers, electrical components, especially high-level electrical components, are based on quantum mechanics. So if you don't believe in quantum mechanics, then you have to agree that your computer should not work, which isn't the case because I can verify right now that my computer works.
Yeah, mine works.
Right. So
unless it's magic. Could be magic.
Now, there is one thing that I do agree with you, and it's actually one of the statements that I have discussions with my friends who are engineers about, and it's that science is getting to the point, especially in cosmology and physics, theoretical physics, even I would say climate physics or what is that? Atmospheric physics. They're getting too abstract for engineers to use. Now, the engineer, I guess you could say, would be the doctor, and the physicist is the researcher, right? So I guess we could say to some extent we agree, but that physicist has to have the same computation level as that engineer. It's just how is this engineer going to apply what this physicist thinks? Now, there is a big problem because science has gotten so abstract that there are things that engineers have no idea what to do with, right? So one of the biggest, the God particle, whatever you want to call it, the Higgs boson, like 3 people on the face of the planet understand it. And if someone tells you that they understand it, they're obviously lying because nobody understands it because it's just an abstract, crazy idea. And then they hand it to engineers and engineers go, what do you want from me with this? This doesn't help me do anything in reality. So to that extent, I will say that there is a big play, but at the level that you're talking about, I do not think that there is a disagreement, and I don't think that there's any reason to be more suspicious of an expert opinion on very basic parameters.
One brief, entirely irrelevant question before I proceed. I see somebody that I think is a cute little kid whose head pops up occasionally. How old?
Yes. She's 2.5.
I just saw the top of the head right above your shoulder every once in a while. Mm-hmm. I'm a school teacher. I love kids, so I just had to ask. Teach elementary school. I think I should possibly explain sort of the what inspired me to author this topic. You
can go ahead.
Oh, no problem. And it's sort of, you argue with people, and have you heard the distinction between the what do you want to say, the operational sciences in the historical sciences?
Yeah.
The historical sciences One of them would be, cosmology, in which we're trying to sort of, I guess I could say, reverse engineer or reverse hypothesize things that happened in the past. And I've had so many discussions over, the years, the last 5 in particular, in which people have made bald assertions. And I'm talking about particularly when I'm talking with intelligent design advocates, that this is how it happened 13.5 billion years ago. And regardless of whether you're a young Earth creationist, or it doesn't actually make any difference. So whether the universe has existed for 6,500 years or 13.5 billion years, or etc., the amount of time that humans have been on the world and able to make intelligent guesstimates about things that happened in a remote past, it's sort of like, well, like you trying to predict what the weather is like where I'm at now. So the universe is huge by any measure, and we're making the assumption that the laws of nature, if you want to call them that, operate in exactly the same way across all of time and space. And I understand why we make that assumption. But that shouldn't allow us to be able to be cocky and say, well, 13.5 billion years ago, we talk about, do you follow any of the fine-tuning arguments?
Yeah, I'm a apologist for the most part. Yeah.
Okay, so the fine-tuning arguments, and I'm not even going to pretend to know the number of parameters that are claimed by intelligent design and or fine-tuning advocates that are sort of magically met by our universe. But I'm going to say we have no fucking clue. For us to say, for a cosmologist, for a physicist to say that, we don't know how life began or whether it's always existed, and yet we're willing to state, well, if we didn't have exactly these conditions, at the beginning, we wouldn't have life in the universe. And I think that's sort of a stupid assertion. And it's not an evidentially based assertion. It's an assertion made because it helps someone who wants it to be true claim that it is. You can't know. That's my argument.
Well, I guess my counter argument to that is, I understand why Christian apologists appeal to science, right? So I guess you could say Catholic apologetics are are much different than Protestant apologetics. Protestant apologetics foundationally try to breed science into what? Here. They try to breed science into their work in defending the faith, which I understand that. I get that. I also understand why Catholics do not, right? So Catholics will say that we reject any scientific arguments for God because it's ludicrous to even have that discussion. Because if the science changes, then we have to replay our hands and retune our arguments when we can just stick to these foundational arguments, right? So I understand that. But I also understand why Protestants use it because, one, it's a tool for the faith. So many Christians, and I say this as a man of faith, right? I'm a very devout Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And so many times I get this conversation where we're talking, right? We're talking about science. I love science. I do economics. I view it as a science. And what is your problem? Oh, no. Just no. Okay. And and they ask me, do you believe in God? And I say yes. And they tell me, why can you believe in science and then believe in God? Or why, if you're so smart, do you believe in God? As somehow or another, science or atheists have a monopoly on intelligence. So I understand why Protestants do it, because Protestants are tired of being told we're stupid for believing in God. So we're going to try to use whatever scientific measurements we can have. Give me 1 second.
No problem.
Come here.
Hello, 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 hello. I am not much of an entertainer. I can't juggle. I don't feel like picking my nose for your amusement. And nudity's out of the question. So I will just stare at myself. I'm going to fetch my puppy. Licorice. Here is my puppy. She is 6 years old and is a miniature poodle. Her name is Licorice, but my students call her Candy. They can't say Licorice.
Sorry, I have to lay her down for a nap. So anyway.
Oh, that's okay.
But what I'm saying is, like, I understand why Protestants do this. I understand why Roman Catholics do this. And I do agree that I think you're missing a good bit of evidentiary support when it comes to, like, the Big Bang and cosmology, because, yeah, it's reverse engineered to some extent, but it's a very deep level of evidence, right? So they've got, like, the gamma waves, the reverberation waves coming off from the universe, and we do apply that physics in one place applies itself the same way to another. I guess you could say the physical laws of the universe, because we can look at how a galaxy set up at the very far end of the universe, and we see that it's set up in a similar formation and in a similar manner as to our universe, which we can observe and say that these laws are true. So I get that. And I understand that there's an issue here because we can't actually test and prove. But in the science that I'm in, economics, we have a very hard time because we can't test things before we do them, right? So again, my love has been in monetary, right? So I believe in nominal gross domestic product level targeting. there's not a whole lot of support for that because there's no way to test it. You'd have to do it. That's the only way you can test it. You have to put a country on nominal gross domestic product level targeting. And if it messes up and it crashes that country's economy, well, that's a very bad way to go about figuring out if it works or not. So I understand that problem, but I'll be right back.
No problem. Now I do wish that I could juggle. Or at least sing, K-pop. I listen to a lot of K-pop for people who don't know and simultaneously who care. I live in South Korea. It is 7:19 a.m. on a Sunday. And I live in a little seaside village on the east coast of the country where I teach elementary school, and I've taught here for the past 8 years. Love it.
Okay, I'm back.
Hello. I would like to make one minor correction. Almost officially, not quite as a matter of doctrine, the Pope in infallibility mode hasn't declared this doctrinally, but Roman Catholicism, for the most part, believes in evolution and have done for a long time. And the Big Bang, and I think the way that it's phrased is that it is in no way incompatible with the Roman Catholic faith.
Right.
But I'll accept, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's specifically about their apologetics. And I do want to make a statement real quick about Catholicism, right? So popes or Catholics of the United States are traditionally traditional, right? The Pope that's in there now is an absolute left-winging wrecker and no true devout Catholic, I guess you could say. And I say this in all seriousness, agrees with most of what the Pope has done. The Pope has went out of his way. I'm partially Roman Catholic. I don't really box myself into any sect of Christianity. I am a Christian in my own right, but I am on a lot of forums and a lot of Facebook pages with Catholics, specifically one called the Socratic Catholic, where he goes over like Catholic apologetics and stuff like that, and he talks about like current status of the Vatican and things of that nature. Like there's a big problem in the Vatican with the Pope. He just recently fired or did something with one of the high-level archbishops. I'm not 100% sure. Because this archbishop disagreed with his, I guess you could say his Latin, I can't remember what it's called, but is the Latin influence of socialism into Catholicism that came along with the catechism of the Catholic Church that caused a huge divide in the Catholic Church, where the Catholic Church was primarily the most strict and objective forms of Christianity. They actually viewed Protestantism as a major problem because it agreed with cultural relativism. And now you see cultural relativism and postmodernism building itself into the Catholic Church through the Latin explosion.
As I think you've gathered from our last debate, I'm not a Christian, but I like our current Pope. When I say our current Pope, I mean the world's versus, mine. I like him more than any Pope in my lifetime And I understand. I'm on a couple of Facebook groups. One called, it might even be Militant Catholic. Maybe it's just the Militant Church. I'm not sure. And they really despise the current Pope. I'm also on a couple of, I'm on a Jesuit Facebook group. I'm in lots of Facebook groups, some of which despise Francis, some of which don't. I only mentioned Catholicism because you had, and I'm fairly certain that during his relatively brief time in, as the pontiff, that Francis has expressed some support for, maybe it would be called theistic evolution. I'm not sure, but for that evolution is real, but that God did it. Matter of fact, I think officially the Roman Catholics believe that everybody still had to come from one pair, whether or not that was Adam and Eve, or I don't know if they I don't know if they say that you must believe in Adam and Eve, but that everybody came from an original pair. But basically, they accept the possibility that evolution is the mechanism by which God brought humankind into existence, and maybe the Big Bang was the the process that God used to bring the universe into existence. If I've misrepresented Catholicism, my apologies to any Roman Catholics listening to this.
No, I think you're right on the money. And it's not just Catholics. I mean, a good bit of Protestants believe that too. A prominent one is William Lane Craig, who is kind of the bane of the atheist existence, from what I hear. The man's a great debater. I've seen him lose debates, and I've seen him squash people in debates. So I think the Sean Carroll debate's probably one that he lost hands down. And I feel bad for him because he really jumped into a realm of physics that he did not understand.
You're the first Christian that I've ever heard concede that William Lane Craig has ever lost a debate. I like William Lane Craig and dislike him at the same time. He's a marvelous debater. He could debate anything pretty much. And I'm on his Facebook group and mainly list, the Reasonable Faith page. I think that he's wrong, of course, about most of what he espouses. But he argues it eloquently. So he has my, praise for that. But you actually think William Lane Craig lost the debate, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean, objectively, if I'm judging debates, he lost the debate to Sean Carroll. I would say it was a pretty close one between him and Lawrence Krauss. Now, I will say I think Lawrence Krauss is a smug son of a bitch, and if I ever met him, I'd probably punch him in the face. Not because he's an atheist, but because I think he's a disgusting human and someone with a serious messiah complex.
There's a lot of atheists, that are sort of celebrity atheists. Lawrence Krauss being one of them, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, the late Christopher Hitchens, that are sort of assholes. Or they, what do you want to say? They are heroes of new atheism, but they're not the face of atheism that I would have handpicked. Let's just put it that way.
Well, I will say, like Christopher Hitchens, right? So I'm a far right wing Christian conservative, capitalist loving American. Christopher Hitchens is the antithesis of all of that. But here's the thing: Christopher Hitchens is the reason why I got into debate. Christopher
Mhm.
Hitchens was the reason why I was a socialist, a communist. I guess you could say I was a Trotskyite for a while, and then I became an
Right,
anarcho-communist and stuff like that. So I was very left wing up until about 3-4 years ago,
right.
and
Yeah,
he was
because
a
Christopher went
huge
through that evolution. He
right,
was, yeah,
right, he was a huge influence on me for quite some time, and I still look up to him as being one of the best rhetorical or rhetoricians you could ever see. Sam
no,
Harris,
exactly.
I love Sam Harris. I think he's wrong. I think that when he debated Jordan Peterson here recently, I think he got swamped by Jordan Peterson. Personally, just
I
because
haven't seen that. I haven't seen that.
you should. There's two debates. There's two debates. One, what is truth? And I'm a pragmatist, and I've not heard anyone go about defending pragmatism and science as well as Jordan Peterson. And I don't think that Sam Harris was well enough prepared to really argue that, right? So, pragmatist, I believe that science is nested within morality, and Sam Harris is a naturalist, a realist. He thinks that morals can be nested inside of science, right? So they're vice versa, right? So something isn't sufficiently true if it causes enough damage, right? So if what we know about smallpox, and smallpox kills half the population of Earth, it's not sufficiently true to say that we knew smallpox, what we knew of smallpox to be true, because obviously we didn't have it morally correct enough for it to be true. If that makes any sense.
Sam Harris, The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris, is one of my favorite books.
Mm-hmm.
Believes that morality is essentially derived from empathy and from man's need, desire. Uh, how do I phrase this? To accommodate the well-being of man. Sam Harris talks a lot about the well-being of man,
Yeah.
and if Sam Harris wasn't such a loudmouth about Islam in a negative way, and Islam is a whole other subject, but I think he uh, is a. I think that his vehemence um, is a disservice to the rest of his message. It's sort of like if you were uh, you could have a lot of wisdom on a lot of subjects, but people are only going to remember you, or you're only going to be well known for your notorious opinions. So I think that Sam Harris should shut up about some things, like I think Richard Dawkins should shut up about some things, and talk about the things about which he can speak authoritatively without embarrassment. Um, my favorite Sam Harris book is called Waking Up, and it's actually a book on meditation. Sam Harris is not a Buddhist, but he almost is. Philosophically, in ways, he sort of is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're ever interested in meditation, Waking Up is a brilliant book.
Yeah, it's a good book. I
And
haven't read it, but I used to watch this guy named Elliot Hulse, who is who run a YouTube channel about, one, it was about helping people exercise, and two, it was about helping people in general. And he took a very Buddhist-like interpretation for science, and when it comes to exercise science, and I always enjoyed it. It actually saved me Elliot Hulse and yoga and stuff like that actually saved me. I was at a point where I could barely walk for about 6 months, and doing that through physical therapy actually helped me. Um, but I will say one thing about Sam Harris. Here are some things that Sam Harris does that are very controversial, and that I agree with, and
Sure.
specifically that I think he's made really good arguments for them. One, race realism. So, I, race realism is a very hard topic to talk about. So the moment you get into race realism, you really have to tread carefully. Now, I take it from his perspective, right? Standing on the outside, going, look, there are some genetic mutational differences here, and I think we should look at those in a more in-depth level, right? I think we need more scientific adventure into this, and that's not happening because I think that there's a big problem with doing that, because the moment you do that, you're going to have some people come into the science, and that comes back to that pragmatism, and saying that the moral argument here is that we shouldn't do it, and that I agree with, but at the same time, there is something that should be done. Secondly, he's an IQ realist. I'm an IQ realist. I have been for quite some time. I hate to break it to people. IQ is the number one correlated effect to success in life. It's about the only thing we can go off of. There's problems with IQ, and I've had this discussion on this board before. There's problems with IQ, but what we know about it, it is the major predictive factor for the rest of your life. Three, Islam. And I tackle Islam specifically from a Christian perspective. So I don't necessarily use the same arguments he does, but I use my Christian perspective versus the Islamic perspective, and I try to get people to look at those two. So I don't necessarily think that Islam is evil, but I do think that it's more authoritarian. I do think that it's the only religion that builds in a political, economical, social, and religious structure into it. Whereas Christianity caused capitalism.
I actually agree.
So if we look at the moral order of the world, we would have to agree that as of right now, I mean, again, past sins be damned, because Christianity is not without imperfections, but Christianity right now is leaps and bounds ahead of Islam within the moral landscape. And I think that's something that Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens, because it wasn't just Sam Harris, it was Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, all of the new atheists, the militant atheists thought, man, Christians are really stupid and really bad people, but Muslims are worse. And they really hounded that. And I guess you could say some of my distinctions against Islam do come back to Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harrison in the early 2000s, when I was a left winger, when I was a socialist, and I wasn't a Christian. And I guess some of that fell over to when I found Christ. But at the end of the day, I can look at Christianity and I can look at Islam, and I can say these are objective differences that need to be talked about and that need to be addressed within the Muslim community, and also needs to be addressed by states that want to do better for their people with respect to Islam.
I lived in Saudi Arabia for approximately a year. In that entire time, I had lots of friends who were from the Philippines and Bangladesh and other nations from which a sizable portion of their workforce comes from. But only one friend who was Saudi, Muslim. So my perspective on Islam comes from that year and from that friendship. So it might be incomplete, but let's just say that I have a little different take on the religion I acknowledge that it has lots of problems, but I think that they're not necessarily any more severe that